So I heard a few things. Do what you can with what you have, where you are right now. That may be the take home for me. But I heard a few other things that I'm going to ask you to reflect on. The way we're going to do Q&A today is we're going to ask you to write your question down. I'm going to ask a few questions after I sort of do a very short summary. I heard pay attention, exercise humility, diversify, be flexible, take risks, be confident, do good work, take yourself seriously, but not too seriously while you're doing that good work. Is that a fair, very short?
I don't know. What do y'all think? I thought I did it better, but
You absolutely did it better. This is the Cliff's Notes. Cliff's
is that
Notes
like
version.
mansplaining? I think that's a name for that. No, it was great. Thank you.
So-
I like the take risk part. That was great.
So, some questions. What are 3 things that you would tell this audience that we need to do right now to start changing what may be a perception and a way of acting around broken communities and move towards a asset frame or opportunity frame about communities?
Well, the change really does begin with the first new question. And it really, and you can't ask the question. I can give you the question. I can't make you mean it. So you have to begin with belief and root out within yourself any belief you have that people aren't living in the way you think they should because they're broken. So if you can start with a belief that says they've figured it out and something's working for them and you really want to know what that is and be present for a conversation that starts with a question like that. So if I said to Amy, right, I say to Amy, do you have children? Okay, niece, nephew? Yes. So when you first held your niece in your arms, what was your most deeply held hope for her?
The future.
And what did you hope that future would be?
That it would be better than everyone around them.
And what would that look like? I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about your niece. How old is she?
I have a nephew who's 30.
A 30-year-old nephew. What did you hope?
That he should be well educated, have a wonderful job, a family, all of those things that make America great.
So does he have an education?
He does not. And so it looks like, to your point, it looks like he has learning disabilities.
Yeah.
And so he has other things. So it looks like he becomes very special to our family.
Yeah. What is the thing you most appreciate about him now?
He loves everyone.
Yeah. So you see how we can go in and say, okay, so I know you want to get your child an education, but really we have to be with people on this journey of what's working for them now and what are the strengths present now and how is the family embracing that. And so as I can tell you the question, by the way, we have a book we give to everyone. And it's saying, here's some kinds of questions you can ask people about their community, but you have to believe that in every person there's a strength and an asset and something there, because I can't make you mean it, right? You have to be genuinely curious.
So I'm hoping you're writing questions down, and hopefully I see Tiffany's walking around to pick them up. So hold your arm up if you've got a question, and I'll and write in a way that you would expect somebody who's got 56-year-old eyes should be able to read. One of the questions that I have is about choosing and/or working with collaborators and partners. Is there an art to that? What advice would you give us about collaboration and working with partners?
So where I got my most profound and lasting lesson in collaboration was after Katrina, because you'll remember that Houston leaders stood up and said, come on, we got you. And Mayor White was mayor then. Y'all remember him? He looks a little like Howdy Doody, and his ears point in opposite directions. He's the opposite of charismatic, and I love him with my whole heart. So the mayor called me up and said something like, Angela, we're going to need you. I'm like, okay. Is there anything particular you had in mind? No, we just want you to do what you do. With that set of instructions, a bunch of us got together and we met weekly, every single week, every service provider in the city. Now here's the secret. We said, ultimately, we resettled 37,000 families. That was the caseload all said and done. And it took 4 years for all of it to get done. And everyone who was at the table initially, we were really varied in our abilities. You know, neighborhood centers could do 20,000. There was an organization that could only do 1,000. But when we spoke, we said this collaboration is going to resettle 37,000 people. And that was the story every time. We didn't mention who was bigger and who did more and so forth. We all did what we could. Here's another practice, incredibly important, every single week. And as you move through this effort, it's the same question. Are you in? Are you out? Because sometimes people are in and they have to be out. And it's okay. It's got to be okay to come in. It's got to be okay to go out. So, you know, all you're requiring of people is the commitment and that they stick with it until they can't and they let you know. No furniture in the room. In other words, you don't get to be a spectator. You can't just show up and observe. You're in or you're out. That was an incredibly important leadership practice. And every week it was, are you in or are you out? So 2 good lessons. If we're all doing it, then whatever we achieve, we all achieve. And on a regular basis, are you in or are you out?
These are questions from the audience. A couple of things. We may not get to all the questions, and I tried to use my best judgment to figure out what order I might go through these, and if there's more, bring them up. So if you're angry, direct it all at me, but do it kindly.
Or send me an email.
That's it, and I can save all these questions. Actually,
I love that.
I love your offer. So what's your next question for your organization?
Oh, so one of the things that we have been grappling with for a couple of years now is Houston still has a lot of mid-skills jobs. And the business community was saying over and over again, we don't have the people we need. And we were saying, well, how can that be? Because we have a lot of people working really hard for very low wages. How can you not have the people you need? Well, as it turns out, we hadn't stepped up to really quantify the gap between the person working, the educational gap, the person working at the low-wage job, the person working at the living wage job. And when the business community described it, it sounded like the Grand Canyon. Oh my God, we're over here and they're way over there, you know. But it was really just a couple of years, 1.5 to 2 years of investment. Then you've got a poverty wage worker that becomes a living wage employee. And that's a place where we want our folks in Houston to go. Having low unemployment is great, but having low unemployment with a lot of poverty says everyone signed up and did everything we told them to do, and it doesn't matter. And we have to make hard work matter. So that was the challenge that that's what we challenged ourselves with, is to quantify it, figure it out, and commit to moving 1,000 people from a low-wage job to a living wage job, and to do that within the next 2 years to prove that, yes, it can be done. It's not the Grand Canyon. There's a bridge, and we can build it. So.
Next question, and people were asked to identify the category of the question. This is a government question, and there's community, financial, backbone team, and other. How can local government make a difference in this work?
Well, I find I will subscribe to and encourage you to read a book, Metropolitan Revolution. Metropolitan Revolution not just because Neighborhood Centers is in there, and I'm proud that we are, but the case that Bruce Katz with Brookings makes in Metropolitan Revolution is the solutions now in the world are all being born in regions, that it's regional leaders and it's regional government that's actually still working. The United States is not unique in our struggles now with our inability to get responsive and evolutionary practice at the federal level. That's happening across the world. But what is true now is that you find county judges and city mayors willing, and have been for a long time, but willing to step outside of whatever differences they may have to embrace what they can do together. So your role is really to hold the space for the conversations, to direct those conversations to where we can work together and where we can be effective together and use resources in a way that has more impact. So I think the only solutions are regional ones, but they're also the best because they're born right out of the environment. It's as if something grows in the very ecology that was meant to support it, and you have a better chance of seeing those things sustain themselves and make a difference over the long haul.
I want to say, Angela, this group of people is really paying attention. These are some awesome questions as I've read them. So, and thank you because you inspired these questions. This one has to do with, I think, your organization. So it's not exactly one of the categories. How do you keep the employees of Neighborhood Centers, Inc. Engaged? Do you have regular town hall meetings with your staff? How do you do it?
So I used to get invited with some regularity to speak at the MBA program at U of H, and the first question I would always be asked is, how do you motivate your employees? That is not my job. I'm not interested in motivating you. You better bring that. So So we've turned employees into children the same way we've turned people in need of our help in neighborhoods into dependents. We're not an employer with employees. And I'm always amused when people in the agency say things like, well, the agency should do this. I'm like, look around. It's just us. No one's coming. If you want it done, you want that done. The next question is, what would you be willing to do to get it started? So we changed our hiring practices, and our hiring practices are driven by appreciative inquiry in the same way our work in communities is. So we are asking you first, tell me about a time when you were at your best. Tell me about a time you were faced with a challenge. What did you do? Who did you work with? And how did you work with them? Tell me about a time when you had directions and you knew how to do things. Tell me about a time when you had to do something you didn't have any directions. It's 2 a.m. and there's a hurricane in the Gulf. So a lot of times I talk with my team, I say, if you really can't make up your mind if this person can really be an evolutionary leader or not, just ask yourself, it's 2 a.m., there's a hurricane in the Gulf, do you want them on your team? Because if you don't, they're not going to be any good every day when you're trying to do the impossible, right? So you're swimming upstream on everything you do. Don't hire a bunch of people that like to sit on the side of the pool and watch, okay? And expect you to motivate them. No. So we look for those people. Many of the folks, I have 1,300 employees and 7,000 volunteers. Many of them came right out of the neighborhoods. They have a story like mine. I'm not explaining to them why this matters. I don't have to motivate them. They are driven in the same way I am. They want my story, their story, to be possible for many more people. So work on your hiring. It's a tribe.
How can churches influence the kinds of programs we've been talking about today?
Well, look, the power of the pulpit from faith-based organizations is enormous. So, when we saw an unpleasant tone kind of forming up around immigration in Texas and about whether or not we were welcoming the very people we were already welcoming, by the way, in Houston, all the bishops and rabbis, and they all got together And I'm just going to say the religious community raises hell better than anybody else. I mean, and they raised some hell. And everybody decided they really didn't want to fight with all the rabbis and the priests and the bishops and the ministers. And we got back to work doing what was right and not what was easy. So the faith community has enormous power to remind us of the generous and caring and loving people that we truly are. And those messages that come out again and again that encourage us to truly love one another in practice as well as in principle really carry a lot of weight. And they really help people feel like it's okay to take the risk and extend themselves to a person or a neighborhood.
This one is probably more commentary than question, but I think worth sharing. We made a home visit to collect data measuring self-control, executive function skills, family environment, etc., and learned the boy's father had been shot the night before and killed. How did that family have the strength to have us visit? We should have asked. So again, I think more commentary and an opportunity to reflect.
So it's not too late. Don't forget to be a human being first. Just go back and say, we were here before, and we were here with an assignment. And I forgot for a minute to be your neighbor. So I'm back because there's a question I'd like to ask you. How did you have the strength? What made our visit so important you were willing to spend time with us after what happened in your family? Go get that answer, because that's the start of a radically different kind of conversation. So you don't have to be perfect to do this. Just understand you'll be as clumsy and flawed as you can possibly be. You're swimming upstream and your entire training was in the other direction. So, yeah, great question. It's never too late to build a relationship.
How important is racial equity to your work?
So I'll start with my own son, who's biracial, and I've watched my son grow up. And I watched what happened when he was a cute little boy, and then what happened when he became a teenager, and then what happened when he became a man. And the city, I spent 30 years working, and a city I wanted to work for everyone, I found in many ways didn't work for my own son. My son has been stopped by the police more often. It happened to him more often before he was 21 than I've been stopped in my whole life, including the period of time when I hitchhiked around the country with a bunch of long-haired hippies. I did not appreciate that. And I think that, first, it's the willingness to have honest conversations about how things aren't working. It's a willingness to acknowledge that and be in the presence of that, whether or not you can fix it. Because, we have white people problems. And white people problems look like this. You can see, can you believe I get away with this? I'm just saying, you haven't thrown me off the stage. But white people problems, so here's my friends. And I'm saying this terrible, awful thing happened to my son. By the way, he's been stopped all these times. He's never been arrested. He's only had one ticket. So my friends all thought, well, what is he doing? I'm like, living, driving, going to school, all the things you do, all the things your kids do. And they can't quite believe it. They think, well, this is just a mom, right? But it really isn't like that. So the white people problem is this. Listen, step one. Believe, step two. Just take the word of the person standing in front of you who's lived this their whole life. Just believe them. It's, what if everything they're telling you is true? And, what happens next is we know we can't fix it. So then we're afraid to hear about it. But, if you're a person of color in this country, you already know we can't fix it. And then there's one other thing, and I offer this with just something deep in my heart to tell you. I've been in Australia a lot. They like me there, thank God. Because you can see, I could end up, needing to leave the way That's my plan B. So they have a practice in Australia, and you may find this awkward, but hang with me. It's called Sorry Day. And it's the day in Australia, and it's coming up, it's in May, in which people in Australia whose ancestors were the perpetrators of horrific things against Aboriginal people. They tried in Australia to marry the worst of what we did to Native Americans to the worst of what we did to Black Americans. And on that day, in their awkwardly and sometimes very white way, they express their regret. And they say to the people in their country who are impacted still, I'm so sorry. Not because I did it. I'm just so sorry that it happened to you. I'm so sorry it was done to the people that came before you. And I'm so sorry that we haven't fixed it all yet. And that it's not fair yet. I'm sorry. So I think I'll say to those of you in the room impacted in that way, I'm sorry. Despite all that we've tried to do in this country, all that we've known to do so far, we're not there yet. And we're still working on it. And if you'll still work on it with us, we may get there. So, more than you expected to get. But it's time we just got honest about this, no? So,
whoever asked the question, thank you for asking the question.
look up Sorry Day. It's a good thing. SORRY. Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
She thought it was a special Australian word. Don't worry. They can't understand me when I say it there either, because they don't understand half of what I say. But
There are many conversations, task forces, activities, initiatives focusing on a variety of needs from poverty to, I would say, lack of health, not quite the way it was written. How do you move people from talking about issues that are framed in the challenge to taking action and building accountability?
yeah. So, I mean, whole books have been written about this. One of them, What Works in American Communities. So you just need to be relentless in your search for what's working. So never, ever, ever stop continuing. Even when someone wants to bring you back to the problem, you're not glossing over it. When someone says, you know, here's this terrible, awful problem, you're saying, this is absolutely true. What do we know about what works on things like this? What else have people done? How have people tackled this? In the whole study of schools where kids, these terrible schools the kids go to, and they don't make it, right? We never look at the kids that do. We never studied them. We have no idea why some subset in the same neighborhood, in the same school, make it out. No, now we're saying the place is the problem. So now we're going to deconstruct the neighborhood that exists, put people in other places. Now we're blaming the place where we used to blame the person. We never took out our magnifying glass to examine what about the kids that made it. Because if we replicated that, then other kids in that neighborhood could make it. So we don't ever gloss over the problem or the pain or the struggle. But in each system, in each case, in each situation, we're looking for what's working. We're looking for what grew in this soil, what grew here that could point the way for what we might do next. And let me just tell you about the poverty. This country has gotten poorer. Look it up. There are just more poor people, so there are going to be more poor neighborhoods and more poor schools. I've never cared, and this is going to shock you at all, about how many poor people there are. I don't care. I care whether there's anywhere for them to go. I care about whether or not, if they make an effort, is there a road out? Are they in a cul-de-sac of misery, going round and round, no matter what they do, it's not going to be different for themselves or their children, or is there a way out? So you're always looking for the road out. And when you talk to people who want to dwell in that other piece, you have to remind them that admiring the problem doesn't get us anywhere.
So I've reached a fork in the road, and I'm going to take it in the words of Yogi Berra. I could go one of two ways, and the line of questioning and the answers kind of lead me this way. But I think this one's pretty interesting. How would you suggest that we think about communities where, in the words of the questioner, so many people in the community are invested in illegality, drugs, violence, prostitution?
Okay, so I'm not going to make light of this, but I will tell you a story. The only reason I ever had school uniforms is my father played poker really well, extremely well. And my grandfather actually ran the poker game in South Louisiana. He was also the sheriff's deputy. These things are not inconsistent if you understand the culture out of which I come. So you can get up on your high horse about all the illegal activity, or you can actually figure out what purpose that's serving and see if there's another opportunity that can be crafted for that community. I'm glad my dad didn't give up those poker skills. We paid for a lot of things from that pocket of money. Now, he did run a legitimate printing business right there in our home, too. But the poker money was the extra. I just say that's going on. But no one's ever been let out of that activity by being condemned for it. And then you've never changed. Nobody's ever been scared or shamed into different behavior. So there's got to be another way. And that means standing beside people to understand what that activity means in their lives and what aspirations they may have for something beyond it. You can't try to make a practice that you don't talk about people that you haven't talked with. Because that will keep you from spouting off, yeah.
So we have about 10 minutes, and I've got 4 questions, and I think we can get through all of them if y'all will be a little bit forgiving with a few minutes. So I'm going to ask and assume that you've said yes to me. I'm not even going to have you raise your hand. How do you get the community residents themselves involved in bringing change to their community?
Well, that's where we start. I mean, it's not because we're not there. We're there by invitation. It starts with the people in the community. And so we've, about a year and a half ago, we were invited into Aldine, which is the city of Houston in our annexation journey got to Aldine and said, wow, poor. Their property taxes aren't going to cover all the things we're going to have to provide, so we just annexed around them. So when you talk about underserved communities, well, let's remember this wasn't an accident. We did this on purpose. So Aldine is a community that really believes in itself. They've been left on their own. They know no one's coming. They've been doing it for one another. So when we're in there, the question of what would you like to see happen in this community? What have you already done to get that started? It's looking at every nascent emergent effort there and getting behind that. So it's when you stand beside people in what they've already undertaken, your posture is different, your energy is different, everything's different about it because we're not going anywhere, they're not leading us. So when every single person there said, they like my father, they have their job and then they have their hustle. And most of it is legitimate, or well, at least legal. We do have a few people running their own grocery stores out of their houses and things of that nature. Maybe not without all the little permission slips. But the really important point is you follow them. You be willing to take that conversation and that service and that effort where they're leading you. Because they will tell you what's most important in that community. They'll tell you what they go to bed worrying about, what they get up early to take care of. Be there with them in that. You will think to yourself, that's going to take too long. Well, just think about how long it takes to create something that no one uses, try to browbeat them into using it, measure their lack of using it, explain it to the funders, and go through that. We've done that exercise. That's long, hard, and unpleasant. Take the time to listen.
We are a multicultural, poor community. We offer food ministry. We work in the local elementary school with tutoring and food. We offer Spanish services. Any additional ideas?
Well, the only idea I have is make sure that the conversation you're having with the people you're serving is alive and fresh, and you're asking them where they want to go next. That's where you need to concentrate your efforts, and that's where you need to support theirs. Just follow them.
What do you think about so many organizations that focus on things taking place outside of our country when we have so many needs here at home in our own communities to start with? How can you or one involve those willing to help others to help their own communities?
Well, okay, so I've been preaching the gospel of listening to the people. If a person is deeply passionate and for some reason in their heart they're committed to work in a different country, it's not my job to tell them what to do with their money. Now, I can be really helpful on that, very helpful as a matter of fact. But, if that's really what they're driven to do, then, you're really not looking for them. You're looking for a person who's trying to figure out what to do here. So just keep going. Don't, and then I think there's another element that I've found also, it helps, and I'm engaging some people in conversation. A lot of what the U.S. has exported in the way of help is something that we can use here. And it's reminding people that the things that they're enabling and supporting in other countries, because we have become a poorer country, that those things are needed here. And that they can make that difference closer to home where they can see directly the benefit from it. But philanthropy is very personal. And there's your role in seeking that support. You have two roles. One is to carry the story of the people you want to help in such a way that people want to be a part of it. And the second role is to do the education that's needed. But fundamentally, one has to honor the choices that people make about their money after you help them, right?
Last question. Please elaborate on what it means to take a holistic approach rather than focus on subpopulations, specific problems, or diseases.
Yeah. So there are probably a fair number of us in this room that live in a neighborhood that we're pretty happy with. Maybe it has a coffee shop, and the place we worship isn't so far away, and medical care it's in driving distance, and we have a financial institution that has got it's accessible and we trust it. You've got some place to gather, place to get together with your friends, and so that's pretty much how we want to live. I mean, honestly, people don't live in cities, they live in neighborhoods, and we all want to live in a neighborhood with a financial institution we can trust, neighbors we are connected to. We say at Neighborhood Centers these four things: learn, earn, belong, and be well. These are the four things we all want, right? So being holistic isn't really like a philosophy as much as it is saying if we're wanting to be useful in very, very low-income, distressed communities, that those people there, our neighbors, are looking for the same elements to be whole, and they're looking for the same elements to be healthy and whole in their community. They want what, in their neighborhoods, what all of us look for out of our communities. So that's the reason for being holistic, is that we've also seen many efforts. Have you seen them where a lot of funding was raised and it was going to change a school? We poured a lot of money into a school. Mr. Gates, who's pretty smart, and he's confident, he poured a lot of money into some things because he thought he knew better than any educator what a school should be like, and if you put this money in it, then it would change everything. But it didn't, because it turns out that schools aren't divorced from the neighborhoods that they reside in, that communities aren't separated into education and transportation and immigration and health and economic opportunity. That it turns out all of that really does need to work together. And you will never achieve that in any perfect incarnation. But you can be the orchestrators of more of those elements showing up and showing up coordinated, and the impact will be greater.
Angela Blanchard, thank you for sharing your wisdom with us.
This is the most fun I've ever had, really. Thank you. This was fabulous. Really great. I'm so proud to have been invited to Dallas, you know? Yay. Thank y'all. Thank you, and good luck to all of you.
This is a
thank you
small
very
token
much.
of our appreciation. Thank you so
You're
very,
awesome.
very much. Thank you
Thank you.
so much. A couple of things. One, and these are things that I'm going to introduce Cheryl, and you're going to hear this again from Cheryl, but as co-chair, I want to say this. The Alliance backbone team is the staff that helped put all of this together, and that makes it possible for people like me to look like I know what I'm doing. And so please join me in giving them a round of applause for their work. And I want to thank those who are leaders with me in here. In particular, I want to recognize Chris Darovich, Peter Roberts, Amy Johnson, and Rebecca. I'm so sorry, Rebecca. Please give them a round of applause. And I do want to thank Cheryl. But as the Alliance co-chair and someone who has been involved in this transition that we're involved with, some of you may or may not be aware that the Alliance was about asthma, and there was charting the course about childhood obesity, and the Alliance now is about both and possibly more things. And I am hopeful that those of you who are on the steering committee continue being interested in one of the two steering committees, continue to be interested in being involved in the work that we're doing. And those of you who are not, to please consider joining this team. Again, I'm really proud of the work that's been done by this organization in the short time that it's existed with the resources we have, and with more folks and directionality and intentionality. I think we can make a real difference for children and families in Dallas and in Collin counties. And so with that, I'm going to introduce Cheryl McCarver, Vice President, Executive Director of the Health and Wellness Alliance for Children, and give her a round of applause as she comes up here.
You were great. Wasn't he awesome? Please give Eduardo a great big hand, and this is our thank you. You're an awesome master. Thank you. I won't keep you long. I just want to thank Eduardo as I did. Thank you, our host committee. You were awesome. Steering committee members for showing up. I thank you to the Backbone team for all that you've done to put on this great event. Mwah! Love you dearly. I'm going to stick close to my notes. I want to also tell you that we have a card at your seat. If you could, as Eduardo has implored you to become part of our work, please indicate that on your commitment card. We want to get in touch with you. We want to connect with you. We want to bring your work and your assets to this work as well. And your feedback on this event, the location, the food, how was it? We did kind of this home style thing that was a little different, but I liked it. That worked. I was surprised. And lastly, if you will do me a favor and look at the back of your name tag, and on the back of your name tag, if you have a yellow sticker, that is our way to say to all of our nonprofits that work so very hard, please take that floral arrangement back home to your nonprofit, share with your team. We appreciate you. We thank you on behalf of the Alliance and Children's Health. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.